All right, so now we're up to 1992, and 92 is without a doubt one of the best years of the 90s. It's, possibly the very best year in my opinion. I think the only other years that can rival it are 97 and 98, but it's a tough one, man. And with 1992, you had one of the tightest MVP races, between Ric Flair and Bret Hart. It's really, really tight. I'm not even sure who I'm going to give the MVP to, but I'll decide at the end of the video. But yeah, when you think of 92, though, the one guy that comes to mind is Ric Flair. And 92 is definitely a step up from 1991 because you had Flair and Bret Hart and Savage. You had better wrestlers in the main event scene. Gone were guys like Hogan, Warrior, and Slaughter. So it was definitely a better rounded year in the title pictures. And then, of course, Shawn Michaels won the Intercontinental Championship before the year was over. But, the biggest event of 1992 was without a doubt the Royal Rumble. This is pretty much considered the best Royal Rumble of all time. I mean, the only other one that would come close, in my opinion, is 2004, but I'm biased, and you guys know why. But 1992's Royal Rumble, it's, it was for the WWF title, which I think made it, that much more special. And, you didn't have any undercard, title matches, so you had everybody in that match. You probably had, even Flair said it on his DVD, you had the best cast of characters ever assembled in a wrestling ring for one match. You definitely had a variety of talent and just great, charismatic superstars. I mean, everyone from Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, Roddy Piper, Shawn Michaels, British Bulldog, Jake the Snake Roberts, Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what makes it so great? It's really tough to put my finger on it, but, Flair entered at number 3, so he was pretty much in the whole entire match. It's not anything that Flair did that was, amazing in the ring that made it stand out. It's just, he just worked his ass off with everybody. I mean, there wasn't one guy that Flair didn't sell for. I mean, every time a guy came out, it was like one-on-one with him and Flair. Flair would just bump like crazy for the guy. I mean, everybody from, British Bulldog, and then when Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado, came out, you see Flair's eyes just lit up like he was facing, Hulk Hogan in the main event of WrestleMania. Like every single guy felt like a huge deal to Flair. And then when Hogan came out, we got great back and forth action between Flair and Hogan. So just a phenomenal Rumble, just such a colorful cast of characters in this Rumble. I would definitely say it's 5 stars. I would definitely say this is, in terms of talent and quality, it's definitely the best Rumble ever. It's really up there. The ending was really, really unique. It really was. It came down to Savage, Hogan, Sid, and Flair. So Macho got eliminated, and then I think it was, Hogan was trying to eliminate Flair. Then Sid saw the opportunity to eliminate Hogan, his friend at the time. So Hogan got pissed off that he got eliminated. So he was trying to pull Sid out of the ring, and then Flair just dumped Sid over. And when Hogan got eliminated, there was like some adults in the front row, and they just were shocked. They just got up out of their seat. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Because Hogan had won 2 times in a row. So it was just a huge deal. And, when Flair eliminated Sid, it was like, Bobby the Brain Heenan, I got to talk about him on commentary. He was incredible. You got the feeling that he would die just to see Flair win this Rumble. And the post-match speech with Flair and Perfect and Bobby Heenan, being interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund was gold. That was, someone has said that Flair, they had never seen Flair so happy in his life. After a match, you could just see it in his eyes. He just had so much emotion. He was just sky high after that match. So, yeah, man, Flair winning the title. And we'll talk about WrestleMania 8 next. But so now we move on to WrestleMania 8. So Flair is the champion, and they decided to go with Macho Man Randy Savage and Ric Flair for the WWF title. And, everybody and their mother pretty much thought, Hogan and Flair would main event WrestleMania. And it seemed like they were going that way. You saw at Survivor Series, Flair screwed Hogan out of the title. It made perfect sense to give Hogan actually was awarded the match at a press conference, but then Sid actually got upset about it. And then we had the feud between Hogan and Sid. And that kind of, superseded the Flair and Savage stuff that ended up being for the title. So why do they go with Hogan and Sid? That's the $1 million question. And you would think Flair will be the better option. You got WCW versus WWE, the biggest stars of the '80s, finally colliding. There's a lot of different reasons. Like I said, in the 1991 rewind, when Flair and Hogan had the house show match in '91, I remember hearing reports that maybe it wasn't that match, but I heard reports that Vince was disappointed in the reaction, that it didn't generate the buzz that they thought it would. So those are some reasons. To me, I just think Vince probably, thought maybe it was too much of a mismatch because Hogan pretty much outweighed Flair by almost 100 pounds at that time. So maybe that was a reason why. And this is just me speculating right now, but I just think Vince gets such a hard-on for size. Everyone has been saying that for years. Vince McMahon is crazy about big guys. And I think he always liked to put Hogan against, bigger guys for WrestleMania. King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, even Ultimate Warrior. So there you go. He's always been, they always matched up Hogan with these huge characters. And I just think they felt Hogan versus Sid was too much of a spectacle to pass up. Because Sid was pretty hot at the time. A lot of people, Sid was really over. If you look at the 1992 Royal Rumble, the aftermath, there was a huge confrontation between Hogan and Sid after the match was over. And the fans were clearly on Sid's side. Hogan even did the pose to the crowd where he put his hand on his ear. And the crowd started booing, and I was like, "Wow, I never heard Hogan booed that loudly before." So, Sid versus Hogan, it looked attractive on paper, I guess, but still, does it really? Is there someone else you could have put in there with Sid? And not really. The only other guy that you could have put in there with Sid would have been the Undertaker, but they ended up facing each other at WrestleMania, 5 years later, anyway. So. But I don't know, guys. Hogan versus Flair, it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in WrestleMania history. It was the only time to do it. WrestleMania 8 was supposed to be Hogan's last WrestleMania, so it's a shame. But there's a lot of debate about the WrestleMania 8 card. I think it's somewhat of a disappointing card considering the talent involved. I think you really could have restructured this card to make it even look better and to have it come off even better. But I still think it ended up being a good WrestleMania, and I still think they did a good job with it, because, Flair and Savage was still somewhat of a dream match, and they told a great story. They had a great match. I do think it's slightly overrated, though. But the only problem I had is you had such a hot angle with Jake the Snake Roberts and Macho Man Randy Savage that you could have easily done that. But I get the mindset. I don't think they really saw Jake Roberts, as, a legendary main eventer like the other guys. It's tough. Jake the Snake was great, but is he really on the same level as Savage, Hogan, and Flair? That's a tall order. So for WrestleMania, you really want to try to stack the card and put present the most attractive matches possible. So I get why they didn't do that. Maybe they didn't think the Undertaker was quite ready to take on a guy the caliber of Sid, who already made a name for himself in WCW. So that's a possibility. But Jake Roberts and Savage would have been a way to go. Bret and Piper for the IC title, that was an incredible story, great promo. Jim Ross even said this on the Piper documentary, one of the best storytelling matches in World Wrestling Federation history. It was that good. It's funny because Piper, usually he goes through these all-out brawls, but because he was the Intercontinental Champion, he felt like this was definitely a time to kind of change his own pace. And, just little things like Piper telling, Bret to tie his shoe, and then all of a sudden Piper just kicks him in the face and Bret starts bleeding. And, just just an incredible storytelling match between Piper and Bret. You know, arguably the match of the night, without a doubt, probably the best match that Piper's ever had. You know, it was just another match that Bret, you know, got the stamp of approval from Vince McMahon. You know, really legitimized him as someone that could really carry the ball. So just Bret Hart definitely delivers in another pressure situation right there. You know, Shawn Michaels and Tito Santana, El Matador. I thought that was a good opener. I just think it could have came off a little bit better. Jake the Snake Roberts actually, you know, even though he was involved in the hot feud with Savage, he actually turned on The Undertaker, or The Undertaker turned on him. I can't remember the situation, but Taker and Roberts had a match at WrestleMania. It was somewhat average. You know, Taker actually tombstones Roberts outside of the ring and put him back in, and actually pinned him. I heard reports that Roberts didn't want to do the job to Taker, or he rolled out of the ring when he shouldn't have. I don't know the whole story behind that. Maybe some of you guys could help me out, but I heard there was some controversy there. So let me talk about Savage and Flair. So Flair was the champion, and Savage was the number one. Eventually was named the number one contender because Hogan and Sid had gotten so personal that you know, Savage was kind of the odd man out and found himself getting a title shot. So the angle that they took was, you know, Flair would try to get under Macho Man's skin by kind of going after Elizabeth. You know, he was claiming that he had a nude picture of her that he was going to present for everyone to see, and I think there was even speculation that Flair and Elizabeth had a relationship prior to Savage and her hooking up. So it's it got really, really personal, and it felt real because, you know, it's pretty well documented that Savage is very overprotective of Elizabeth. So I think that's why it made for such a nice story. The match itself, I thought it was good and everything. I just wouldn't say it's one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. Like, some people have it at like 3 in the best WrestleMania matches of all time. I think even Spinnernet, I remember watching his video. I think he had it at number 3. So it's a great nostalgia match. It's a great story. It's a great aftermath. I give Flair was incredible in the aftermath here. You know, I thought Savage and Flair both brought their A games. It really came off well. The only problem with the match is, you know, Mr. Perfect was at ringside. I felt, you know, when Elizabeth came out, I felt like there was too much outside shenanigans that took away from the match. And even though it was a very well executed wrestling match with Flair, you know, just, you know, busting out the figure 4 and really just a lot of good fast-paced action from both guys. It really is the last classic Macho Man match in the WWE, and it really solidified him as probably the best performer from the first 10 WrestleManias. Because you got WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 5 with Hogan, WrestleMania 7 with Warrior, and then you get WrestleMania 8 with Flair. You know, he had 5 of the best WrestleMania matches of all time during the first 10 WrestleManias, and I think it was CM Punk that, even in his opinion, he thought Savage is the real WrestleMania, real Mr. WrestleMania. So, you know, you can make a legit case because Savage is the one that kind of laid down the groundwork for, you know, putting on classic matches at WrestleMania, that, you know, he could be the guy, you know, he should be that guy to be labeled as Mr. WrestleMania. It's definitely possible. But like I said, guys, the aftermath was great, you know, because you know, Savage had, you know, pulled the tights and rolled Flair up to win the title. And, you know, after they were celebrating, you know, Flair comes up to Elizabeth. He was like, he's got blood on his face. He's like, "What about me, huh?" And, you know, and then he just kisses her on the cheek, and then Savage goes ballistic. So it was a great, you know, dramatic atmosphere, and it definitely, you know, it was definitely the match. I would probably say it's still the match of the night. I just think, you know, it's a little bland when you compare it to some of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. I think that's a fair assessment. All right, so the main event was Hogan and Sid. This is one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. I mean, it had a crappy ending. You know, just no chemistry between these guys. It wasn't about the match. I mean, I want to try to say something positive about it, but I just can't. I wouldn't say it was. I wouldn't say the whole thing was awful. You know, there was probably worse WrestleMania main event. You know, it probably is the worst WrestleMania main event. It's definitely up there. I mean, there's just very little I could say about it that's positive. It was a disqualification. Sid didn't stick around after WrestleMania, so I don't see any reason why. Hogan was both guys were leaving. If you want to compare anything to Brock and Goldberg, this would be it. Hogan got a pretty generous reaction, though. He didn't get the boos that you heard at the Royal Rumble. So Papa Shango came out after the DQ, was tying Hogan up, and then Ultimate Warrior finally returned after a 7-month absence and made the save. It's shocking that the Ultimate Warrior came back after holding Vince McMahon up for $500,000. I think Vince put his ego aside and realized Hogan was leaving. Warrior was still, maybe he's still hot and has, gas left in the tank. But to me, the Ultimate Warrior's run in 1992 was, I said this in the 91 Rewind. I just felt like he lost momentum. And it was weird, too. I just thought it came off corny. You had Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior celebrating at the end. It came off kind of cartoonish. It came off a little bit outdated. Both of those guys just didn't have the energy and the vitality that they had in, the 1990, 1991 heyday when they were both in their prime. Something was just lacking here. And Warrior's presence just was kind of underwhelming. It looked like a different Ultimate Warrior. It just didn't look like him. I don't know if it was the haircut. It looked like he hadn't been lifting weights. Warrior was jacked at WrestleMania 7 when he fought Savage, and he definitely looked like he lost about 50 pounds of muscle. He looked really, really small next to Sid, so he definitely lost a lot of size. Eventually, I believe it was confirmed that he failed the steroid test at the end of 92. So we had this whole speculation here with Hogan taking steroids. I didn't do my research, so I'm not sure if 1992 or was it 93 when Hogan officially got fired for steroid use. I'm assuming it's 92 because Hogan was a lot bigger in 92 than he was in 93 when he was, Hogan was somewhat skinny in 1993. So I'm assuming it was 92, but Vince was under a lot of scrutiny because there was supposedly distribution of steroids within the WWE. A lot of things took place. Hogan actually ended up getting fired because of that back in the day. So, I was going to talk about the Roddy Piper's death because this is, in some ways, WrestleMania 8 is Roddy Piper's best match of all time. If you want to throw in the Starrcade match with Greg the Hammer Valentine, that's probably up there. But in the WWE, WrestleMania 8 was pretty much Piper's defining moment as far as wrestling goes. And then WrestleMania 8, it was kind of Hogan's farewell. Vince and Hogan actually did an interview before the main event. So Hogan was gone in 92. That was it. He was going to explore Hollywood and other options. So that was pretty much it. But the whole Hogan racism thing, I feel like it's kind of I was going to give my opinion on it, but I don't want this video to drag any longer than it is. So I'm just going to move right along to SummerSlam. So Macho Man Randy Savage is the champion, and they booked him in a face-versus-face match with the Ultimate Warrior. It was kind of weird. The Warrior, I don't know if this had anything to do with steroids, but they kind of changed the Warrior's attire. He was wearing a singlet, a one-piece, with like muscles on it. I thought it was kind of weird, but he was still over. I would say at the SummerSlam match in England. England's definitely got the best wrestling fans. I don't know why they Is it because they don't really follow a lot of sports in England? It seems to me like pro wrestling is probably the #1 sport over there. I don't know. You guys know better than me, but the London England crowd for Wembley SummerSlam '92 was incredible. The Warrior and Savage match. Savage was a great guy to pair Warrior up against. This match, it wasn't quite as memorable as WrestleMania 7, but it was still good. The chemistry was still there. The match had a lot of drama. Both guys got a lot of support from the crowd. I actually like face-versus-face matches because it's very, very minimal on the rest holds, and sometimes when guys try to constantly try to stall to get heat, it kind of gets repetitive. But I really enjoy face-versus-face matches. But you have Flair. Flair wasn't involved in the SummerSlam match, so him and Mr. Perfect were at ringside, and they teased that one of those guys is going to be selling out to Mr. Perfect. And basically none of them sold out. It was just Perfect trying to play mind games with both of them. to kind of soften them both up for Flair when Flair would get his title shot after SummerSlam. So it ended in a count out, actually. Savage actually got counted out, so Warrior actually won the match, but he didn't win the title. So that was pretty much the end of the Ultimate Warrior in 1992. That was it. They actually tagged him up with Macho Man leading up to Survivor Series as the Ultimate Maniacs, which produced some really corny promos. But I guess he just failed the steroid test. I'm not sure if this is when the HGH situation came about. Apparently him and Davey Boy Smith were experimenting with HGH. Maybe that's the reason why he got fired. I don't know if that was 91 or obviously that wasn't 91, but maybe that was 92. Maybe that was 96 when referring to the HGH stuff. Maybe it was 96 because HGH is sort of a newer drug. Yeah, so that's it with Warrior. And so Savage is still the champion, but Savage actually ended up losing the belt to Flair at a Saturday night's main event. I think it was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I think Flair actually beat him with the figure. He actually pinned him with the figure four. I believe Savage actually passed out. And Bret has been very candid about that match. And one of the reasons why Vince decided to go with Bret was he lost a lot of confidence in Flair as the year went on. And it was really, I don't know, something about Savage in 1992 was lacking. I don't know what it was. It seemed like there was always a lot of overselling in a lot of his matches. I don't know if he had knee issues at the time, but there was something definitely lacking about, Savage's performances as the year went on. Like I said, guys, I think he was trying to hide an injury. But, apparently Vince was so upset at the first taping of the match that he told both guys out to go back out there and do the finish again. He was like screaming at both of them. So, and Bret said that's when, Vince made up his mind that, he wanted Flair to win the title back so he could drop it to Bret because, Bret, at SummerSlam 1992, Bret proved that he was the man. That was like his crowning achievement. I think he actually, in losing the Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam, he actually, won the title and became the face of the company, at least for the short term. It was definitely the best bet. It was a safe bet. They were, obviously they were going through the whole steroid scandal at the time, so they needed to, put the belt on someone that was, wasn't a huge guy, but that was still a great wrestler, still a great character, could still, go out there, have an amazing match with anybody. So it always seems like when anything was in doubt, they would, the backdrop would always be wrestling. So we move on to Wembley, SummerSlam 1992. The Intercontinental Championship match gets the main event. What I didn't know was Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, actually took off the whole summer. And it's weird, even though you could argue at that time, this is probably the greatest match in WWE history. I mean, I would say that it probably surpassed Steamboat and Savage from WrestleMania 3 as the best, match that WWE had ever had. But it's funny because if you look at British Bulldog, I would say in 1991 when he had those matches against the Warlord, looked a lot better back then. Bret had said that he took the whole summer off and was out of shape, was gassed after the first 3 minutes. And Bret, and a lot of people consider this the best carry job of all time. When you talk about what's the best carry job of all time, this match always gets brought up. And I don't want to take anything away from Davey Boy Smith because he proved in this match that he's an amazing wrestler. He definitely has talent, definitely has skill. It's just, to me, it's just that Bret, was more of the heel in the match because they were in Davey's home country. So, with the combination of Davey Boy and Bret, it felt more appropriate for Bret to dictate the tempo and control the match as more of the heel of the match. I'm not going to say that Bret deserves all the credit for this being good, but Bret would agree that he pretty much had to carry and work his ass off to make this match work. That was the words out of his mouth. He said he was very disappointed in Davey's performance because he wasn't remembering a lot of the spots, and he was severely winded. He actually said something, I think, in the shoot. Bret said Davey was like, I'm fucked. So, but yeah, I thought the match came off amazing. And like I said, guys, it was Bret's crowning achievement. And this is what won him the title in Vince's eyes. He actually said to Vince McMahon that if you let me and Davey go out there at SummerSlam and in Davey's home country for the Intercontinental Championship, it'll be the greatest match of all time, and nothing will ever be able to top it. That's what he said to him, and Vince was like, all right, well, show me. And he did it, you know, and I think when you back up, you know, a statement like that and it comes out just as good as you predicted. I mean, it proved that Bret could thrive under pressure, and obviously his confidence grew. Why not just put the belt on him? You know, Bret had paid his dues for years. He had been there since 1984. You know, just paying his dues, coming up from the bottom, and you know, the time was definitely right. So Flair was the champion, and Bret had won it in Saskatoon, Canada. But you know, the interesting thing before I get away from SummerSlam is there was a lot of debate about where to have SummerSlam. There was rumors that it was going to be in Washington D.C. and then they ended up having it in London, England, like at, you know, maybe a couple months before it was announced. And the original plan was for Bret to drop the Intercontinental Championship to Shawn Michaels in a ladder match in Washington D.C. So you know, Shawn and Bret actually had a ladder match at a house show, but it wasn't anything crazy. You know, Bret is you know, he's upset with Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon because he felt like he should have been the one to have a ladder match, you know, showcased on pay-per-view because, you know, Bret Hart had ladder matches in Stampede Wrestling with the Dynamite Kid. So he really wanted to be the one to really, you know, show the world what a ladder match is. So he was kind of always bitter. You know, that's probably one of the reasons why Bret and Shawn never really got along. I think there was a little bit of bitterness about that particular ladder match. WrestleMania 10, you know, Bret not being the one to be showcased in it. So that's just a little side note right there. But, you know, bottom line is Bret Hart was hot. And October 12th, 1992, Saskatchewan, Canada, I believe, at a house show that was actually aired on Coliseum Video's Smack 'em Whack 'em tape. You know, Bret actually defeated Flair for the title. There's a lot to say about this match. You know, both guys are very negative about the match. Flair actually said in his book that he thought the match was terrible. He wished he could have gave Bret a better match because he had an ear infection. And Bret is kind of bitter about the match. He actually, this is a shoot he did with Kayfabe Commentaries about 1992. I definitely want to review that eventually when I see it. But when Bret faced Flair, he thought Flair was trying to sabotage the matches because Flair had realized that Vince was giving up on him and going with Bret. And ever since then, you know, Bret felt like his work with Flair was deteriorating as the months went along. But, you know, in Flair's defense, he had an ear infection and he just wasn't the same. So, no, I thought the match was good, but not great. You could definitely tell Flair was more in control in the match. He was the heel, so he dictated the tempo. There's a lot of times when Bret felt like Flair was being unsafe with him. Like, he actually hurt his ankle because Flair would, you know, do these spots that weren't really planned. And, you know, Bret and Flair had always, you know, they had a huge feud in 2004, mainly because Flair, made the comment about Owen Hart, how he used his brother's death to gain sympathy and stuff. So that really set Bret off. And then the truth came out about how Bret really felt about Flair. But, you know, they made up. You know, Bret was actually on Flair's podcast not too long ago. And Bret had said, you know, the main issue is that he felt like it was a generational gap. You know, Flair had come from this one generation where they were taught a certain way. You know, even Stu Hart had made the comment that Flair was, you know, a routine guy, how he would have the same match over and over again. You know, you heard comments like that. So it was just two different eras colliding. You know, Bret was kind of representing the new generation. So you had these two different styles just kind of clashing. It was kind of a clashing of the egos. So there's a little bit of bitterness on both parts. And you would expect, you know, you could argue that Flair and Bret are the two greatest of all time in the ring in the history of the United States. And for, you know, out of all the matches that they had on tape, you know, none of them really lived up to expectations, you could argue. So before we get to Survivor Series, like I said, the plan was for Shawn Michaels to win the Intercontinental Championship. So Davey was kind of just holding it because they needed a huge attraction for London, England to main event the show. So Shawn Michaels actually defeated Davey Boy at Saturday night's main event in a wicked, fast-paced match. That was, just tremendous athleticism right there. Very, very short. A lot of great replay value. Shawn Michaels sold his ass off for, the British Bulldog there. And, Shawn Michaels won the Intercontinental Championship with a crossbody off the top rope. So great ending. Shawn Michaels is the IC champion heading into Survivor Series. So because Shawn Michaels is the one that defeated Bulldog, it kind of made sense for the Intercontinental Champion to face the WWF Champion, the guy that lost to the guy that Shawn Michaels had just beaten for the IC title. So it made perfect sense. And Survivor Series 92, I wouldn't, Shawn Michaels still had a long way to go. Give him credit, man. This was definitely his first year as a single star. So, his conditioning and his, just this whole psychology and persona, it wasn't quite what it would become the next couple of years. But, the relationship was great between Bret and Shawn at the time. They were great friends. Shawn, Bret actually showed Shawn a tape of the SummerSlam match with British Bulldog, and Shawn actually said to Bret, he said, "Unfucking believable. You're the best athlete I've ever seen." So at that time, Bret was more of a leader. Shawn Michaels was still learning, and they worked great. And Survivor Series '92, it wasn't an amazing, spectacular match. It was just a good, solid, exciting main event. Just a huge title defense for Bret. He actually made Shawn Michaels tap out to the sharpshooter, and it's kind of funny how 5 years later, they were both in the same position, just with just crazier and more stressful circumstances on the line. But so Bret made Shawn tap out to the sharpshooter. Just a good, really solid main event right there. Very, very underrated match. Definitely probably one of the best Survivor Series matches of all time. Definitely the match of the night for Survivor Series 92. So the other thing worth talking about from Survivor Series 92, and I remember when this pay-per-view happened, I was on the fence about ordering it, and I didn't order it as a kid. My passion for wrestling as a little kid, it was, wasn't quite the same as it was. But, as an adult, you can look back at 1992 and really appreciate it for the wrestling aspect of it. And, this featured a great tag match and a great babyface turn. The Ultimate Warrior had left the company, so it was supposed to be Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior versus Ric Flair and actually Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon made his debut at the end of 1992. Hot character, really played that, Tony Montana Scarface character to a T. But since the Ultimate Warrior had, failed the steroid test, they had to find a replacement. And at the time, because Flair had so much history with Mr. Perfect, it made sense to turn Mr. Perfect babyface. And it was very well done. Savage actually asked Perfect to be his tag team partner, and they were in a press conference with Vince and Bobby the Brain Heenan and Perfect. And Perfect just kind of lost his cool with Bobby the Brain Heenan, and he said, "You know what, Savage, I accept your invitation." And then Heenan actually gets up and slaps Perfect. And then Perfect is like, "You know what, Heenan? I'm sick of taking your crap and Flair's crap, and I'm going to be Bret Hart's partner." I can't do it justice just by talking about it, but you guys get the picture. I thought the Mr. Perfect babyface turn came off pretty great. And they did a lot of teasing during the match about whether you could trust Mr. Perfect or not. Match ended in a DQ. Wasn't really anything special, but I thought it put Mr. Perfect over huge. This was the kind of match where, Perfect could have used this momentum to main event WrestleMania. I thought it came off that great. But, you had a lot of star power in that tag match. Really the only other match worth talking about from Survivor Series 92. There's really not much else to talk about from the show. I believe, Tatanka made his debut against Rick the Model Martel. Really, the Survivor Series elimination matches were kind of fading. They only did one of them with Natural Disasters and Money Inc. and the Nasty Boys and the Beverly Brothers. It came off very average. That's pretty much it. But, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels main event for the title. That really stole the show from Survivor Series. They actually ended the show with Bret Hart dressing up as Santa Claus. So you could just tell, Vince was going, above and beyond to make Bret Hart stand out, because he wasn't, a huge 350-pound, superhero-looking type of guy. But yeah, Bret Hart ends 1992 as the champion, as the man, and we'll see you guys for 1993.